Hi people, me again, obviously moving away from it as always and as usual. Yeah, as you can tell based on the header, as always and as usual, this video is about why psychiatry does not work to cure mental illness. Before I begin, as always and as usual, you can find the article that corresponds to this video, in which this video will be embedded, linked in the description of this video. And yeah, I'm going to read from my own article, but the article is for people that want to read and not specifically want to sit through and watch me and primarily listen to what I have to say. Although I think the majority of my viewers or anyone watching this or everyone watching this prefers the latter, but it doesn't matter, I leave it up to you. In any case, yeah, let's begin. Why psychiatry does not work to cure mental illness. This subject is something that people observant enough already know. It is no mystery to the world that treatment of mental illness is inadequate and mostly impractical, to say the least, in every imaginable way and or manner. People that are mentally ill, especially the serious ones, are labeled incurable, and that there is no hope for them. Not to mention the stigma that comes along with it, being shunned by others and having a hard time finding work or employment, to name a few. Being mentally ill, or as others will tease you being crazy or a loon, is a death sentence in society, even more so if your mental affliction is long-term or permanent in nature. Below, I give the answer to the header of this article. The reason why the medical world does little to nothing to help the mentally ill and or is unable to do so, at least en masse, is quite simple. They focus on the material. Treatment of a mental disorder by default is done in such a way that the entire focus is placed on the cause being material in nature. Common sense tells you that you can't treat a spiritual ailment or spiritual ailments with material tools or methods. Within this context, they're like polar opposites. You wouldn't try to heal a broken leg with a citation, would you? Exactly. Physical injuries or disorders require physical treatment, the same for the metaphorically adverse. The default way of working in terms of treating the mentally ill is to pump them full of drugs, e.g. antipsychotics, detain them temporarily and hope they calm down, quote unquote. For the rest, no change is made in the medical sector globally because they simply don't know how or what to do about it. Any advancements they make is minor at absolute best. What's the solution, you might wonder? Most people that are mentally ill have traumatic life events, e.g. a horrible childhood, as the root cause that sets the precedent for the affliction, which consequently disrupts their life severely. This cause needs to be identified, acknowledged, and nullified or eradicated, regardless of how the latter happens. That's all. Yeah, and that's the article, and as always and as usual, it is self-explanatory. The problem that the medical world has with people that society deems crazy or insane, so essentially, professionally speaking, the mentally ill, the mentally disturbed, the mentally afflicted, is that they don't know what to do. They don't know how to treat them because, again, the medical world, which is dominated by science, operates on the precedence of materialism. They work purely with the material world. So they focus on tackling every problem with the material, and honestly, personally, I don't know a lot of people that would be jumping for joy to work in the psychological sector. So it's like when someone says the medical sector, people immediately think, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden they say, for example, I work in a psych ward, and then it's like, oh, immediately it's like a disappointment. It's like being involved in the psychological aspect or the psychological department of the medical sector at a global level, the medical field, is kind of like a downgrade, essentially, because it's not really exactly a place where people want to be. And obviously that's a shame, but the reason is that it's kind of like a professional level of denial. Some people in the medical world, they know well enough, good and damn well enough that, hey, you can't, everything I said at a base level, that, hey, someone is psychologically ill, you can't, there's nothing we can do for the person because we work purely with the material. So there's nothing we can do, but they have no other choice. So they just do what pretty much all of them do, which is pump every patient full of drugs. Usually it's antipsychotics or anti-psych meds, as they like to shorten them or abbreviate them. and they temporarily detain the person, and they hope that like after a while the person calms down and yeah, you can leave. But of course this does not work, especially at best it works for people that are superficially mentally ill. Not even mentally ill, people that simply had like a nervous breakdown or similar. For example, a loved one died and they simply had difficulty processing it, they became depressed, they became this, they became that. It'll work in that case, but what it will definitely not work for is people that are seriously mentally disturbed, people that suffer from at least one serious mental illness or mental disorder. Serious in the sense of, on a scale of 0 to 10, an 8 at least, or at least a 7.5. And yeah, that's the problem. You can't treat someone like that, so it just turns into a vicious cycle where the person is released after a while, and then the person does something horrible again, or screws up, or just loses their mind again, and the cycle just repeats itself. And for the person, it's a death sentence. I mean, we all know that. All of us in the world, more or less, we know that people that are seriously mentally disturbed, people that are at least partially mentally gone, by societal standards, there is no hope for them. There's like, okay, yeah, so pretty much game over for you. There is no hope. You're like detached from reality to an extent, or to a point where, or vice versa, to a point or extent where again, life is just going to be miserable. You're just going to be miserable, and or life will just be misery. Life will be like a seemingly never-ending cycle of misery, of hitting rock bottom frequently at the very least, and worst case scenario all the time. And it's only a matter of time before you either become homeless or similar, or you commit a crime and you get permanently locked up in a psych ward for the criminally insane, or something to that equivalent or extent. But yeah, the message is clear, and come on, common sense tells you that. The same way that if your leg is broken, or you have a nasty gash or a cut or similar, then it requires a material solution. You're not just going to like write down some kind of citation in which you genuinely hope the best for your affliction. No, at a base level, literally base level, as superficially speaking as possible, something is wrong, you broke a bone or two, you need to go to the hospital. It requires physical treatment, and that's it. Because your leg is physical in nature, it is part of the material plane. But people that are mentally afflicted or mentally ill, it's the name speaks for itself. Mental, it's purely psychological in nature, so it's spiritual, it's astral. And just like I said in my article, the problem plain and simply needs to be identified and acknowledged. The vast majority of people that have mental disorders, it stems from 9 out of 10 times, or at the very least 7 or 8 out of 10 times, it simply stems from traumatic life events, especially those regarding childhood when they grew up. This is based on the fact or premise that, obviously factual premise, this is simply based on the fact that when people grow up, they become shaped. The same way their physical bodies become more developed and whatnot, they spiritually also become more developed, and you can imagine that if something goes wrong in that cycle, to put it that way, or within that whole process, then it's going to lead to serious difficulties and or issues. The same way that if, for example, you were made to, for example, while you were growing up, since you were a child, to carry weights that you could not physically lift, then it can have, and it will have, dire consequences for your physical body. Anything from being slightly hunched over to having slightly naturally dislocated bones. I don't know if that's possible even, but metaphorically speaking. Bottom line is that your body is not going to be functioning optimally, and worse yet, that when you grow up, then your body is essentially in a permanent state of metaphorical disrepair. Your body isn't functioning and operating the way a normal person's body functions and or operates. I mean, we're not talking about something small, something minor, no, something really, really serious. The same way that, for example, people that don't wear braces when they grow up and they like really flick around with their teeth all the livelong day, by the time they're adults, at least young adults, they'll have tremendously horribly crooked teeth. within that same and it's really hard to recover. I'm not saying it's not possible, but as an adult, it's a lot harder because while you were growing up, like I said, the rest of your body grows, and if everything is put in place properly, then your body will align itself properly. But if that's not the case, then things are going to go awry. And with mental illness, it's a lot worse, lot worse. Okay, mental illness by any measure, honestly, metaphorically at the very least, supersedes physical illnesses. So someone that, for example, grew up in a broken home, someone that comes from horrible life conditions, someone like that, okay, someone that grew up in a dysfunctional environment, to say the least, when they were spiritually underdevelopment, so to speak, as well as physically. We're primarily focusing on the spiritual. While they were under spiritual development, other than automatically their physical bodies in alignment developing as well, there's going to be trouble, to say the least. The person will develop a plethora of disorders that depend all on the severity of the horrid conditions the person grew up under. If again, it all depends. The level of mental illness depends on the severity of the conditions they grew up under, in terms of how horrid or how abysmal they were or how abhorrent they were. But if and usually the problem is that the issue goes unaddressed. And like I said, even worse, it seems like there is no help, honestly. You can try to reach out to the medical world, you will get little to nothing in the way of understanding, and you will get 9 out of 10 times the aforementioned treatment. And that will do little to nothing for you, honestly. Like I said, if you have a superficial disorder or something, then you'll most likely be fine. But no, the medical world, all they can do is offer you medical counseling, and even that is subpar in nature. Like I said, it's like trying to fit a circle into a square, or vice versa, They're simply not compatible. They don't go together, generally speaking, at the very least. Physical problems require physical solutions, mental problems require mental solutions. And just like I said, you want to heal someone that is mentally ill, the root cause of their mental illnesses or mental illness, or vice versa, needs to be identified, acknowledged, as in, this is what you have, you've come to terms with it, whether you want to admit it or not, this is what you have. This is where it comes from, this is what you have, and or vice versa. And this is what we're going to do about it. This is how to solve the issue. And there you go. Person is mentally healed, and that's all. Affliction gone. But the medical world cannot come up with, globally cannot come up with stuff like that. It seems simple, but believe me, it's a lot more complicated than it is. People don't know how to deal with stuff like this. I mean, the professional world, for the aforementioned reason, does simply not know how to deal with this. Doctors, etc., psychologists, psychotherapists, therapists, they don't know how to deal with stuff like this. They just don't know. Because, again, they're working purely from a vantage point or point of view of the material. That's all that they see. They don't know how to cope, how to deal with the material. That's not what they specialize in. They specialize in what you can see, hear, and feel with your naked eye, with your physical eye. That's all. And obviously, the results, or better said, lack of the results, lack thereof, speaks for themselves. Or it speaks for itself. You can see globally that, bluntly put, if you're crazy for whatever reason, you're insane, you're fucking whacked in the head, then it's pretty much a death sentence. You can forget having anything that resembles a normal life. It's game over for you. Doesn't have to be the case, but yeah, unfortunately, the way society is configured, it is. And there you go. Until next time, as always, goodbye.